Welcome to Tomato Times, where we bring you an in depth investigation into the global tomato industry. Today's edition explores a hidden system behind one of the world's most common foods. In today's issue, we explore five key stories shaping how tomatoes are produced, sold, and understood globally. The topics of explorations are sustainability crisis, pricing and food inequality, labor conditions, marketing and perception, cultural identity. In today's feature story, we investigate the environmental cost of tomatoes. From local farms to global supply chains, the way tomatoes are produced and transported can have very different impacts on the environment. Our report takes a closer look at what sustainability really means in this context. Our first story examines the environmental impact of tomato production. Using life cycle analysis, researchers evaluate how production methods and transportation affect sustainability. Tomato production has very different environmental impacts depending on how and where it is grown. Research shows that local open field farming, often called zero mile production, is the most sustainable because it requires minimal energy and transportation. In contrast, heated greenhouses, which allow year-round production, have the highest environmental costs due to energy used for heating and climate control. Transportation is another major factor. Shipping tomatoes long distances significantly increases carbon emissions. However, precision farming technologies such as sensors and data analytics can reduce water, fertilizer, and energy waste. While these innovations improve efficiency, they also raise important questions about accessibility and equity, which leads into the broader social implications of sustainability. While precision farming improves environmental efficiency, it is not socially neutral. This is explained through the concept of the technological treadmill, where farmers must continuously adopt expensive technologies to stay competitive. Large scale farms can afford these investments, but small scale farmers often cannot, creating a digital divide. As a result, power becomes concentrated in the hands of the larger corporations. Additionally, automation reduces the need for manual labor, leading to job displacement and rural economic challenges. This creates a situation where environmental gains may come at a social cost. Therefore, true sustainability in tomato production must go beyond technology and include equitable policies, ensuring access to innovation while protecting livelihoods and supporting smaller producers.
Breaking news. Tonight, we're looking at a side of tomato waste that consumers usually do not see. When people talk about wasted food, the focus is often shifted towards households. However, in the tomato supply chain, a lot of waste happens much earlier, before tomatoes reach the store. Tomatoes may be rejected not because they are unsafe, but because they do not meet the expectations for size, shape, color, firmness, or surface appearance. In other words, a tomato can be edible and nutritious and be treated as unmarketable. This matters because it shows that food waste is not just a matter of personal choice, it is built into the rules of the food system. This is where sociology plays a role. Supermarkets are not just passive places where consumers pick whatever they want. They are food environments shaped by powerful retailers who influence what products are visible, acceptable, and profitable. In that sense, retail standards do not simply reflect consumer demand, they also help produce it. The burden of these standards is also uneven. Research on aesthetic grading found that appearance based sorting caused food losses without financially benefiting farmers. Other research shows that retailers can appear socially responsible on food waste while maintaining standards that push waste upstream in the supply chain. That means growers often absorb more of the losses while retailers protect product image and store presentation. At the same time, tomato research shows that when farmers have access to distribution channels, fewer products go unsold. That suggests the problem is not only the tomato itself, but how the market is organized. So the bigger story here is this. In the tomato supply chain, food waste is not only created in kitchens, it is also created by retail standards, supply chain power, and the way quality gets defined long before consumers ever make a choice.
I'm reporting live from what the public thinks is the heart of tomato history, Italy. But our investigation today reveals a massive case of historical identity theft. While global audiences associate this pizza on the right with European heritage, the primary source tells a different story. Scientifically known as Solanum lycopersicum, the tomato originally is from Andes and was perfected by indigenous farmers in Mexico, who called it tamati. It wasn't until 1492 that colonizers brought these seeds across the Atlantic. What we are seeing here is gastro-nationalism in action, a sociological phenomenon where a nation rebrands a foreign crop to build its own national identity. By marketing the tomato as traditionally European, the true indigenous roots are being systematically erased from the global menu. Moving deeper into the food system, we've uncovered how this rebrand is enforced by law. The European Union uses protected designation of origin seals, like the one you see here, to legally dictate what counts as an authentic tomato. While this claims to protect tradition, sociologists argue it's actually a tool of economic dominance. By defining authenticity through European land, these institutions effectively shut out the original indigenous cultivators from the profits of their own native crop. This is the coloniality of taste, a marketing strategy that sanitizes food history to benefit Western corporations while devaluing indigenous knowledge. To break this cycle, movements from indigenous food severity are calling for a total shift in culinary storytelling. We need to stop asking which tomato is authentic by European standards and start asking who truly holds the power in our food chain.
So for this part, I'm looking at how marketing shapes the way we see tomatoes. A lot of tomatoes are labeled as organic, local or sustainable, which makes them seem healthier and more ethical. But these labels don't just give information, they actually shape what we pay attention to. So instead of thinking about how the food is produced, we focus more on ideas like quality and sustainability. In that way, marketing creates a simplified version of the food system. But the question is, what are we now seeing? So here I'm looking at what marketing leaves out. First, there's power over information. Companies basically decide what consumers get to see, so they shape how we understand the product. Second, labor is mostly hidden. We don't really see the working conditions or the people behind the tomatoes. And finally, this connects to a bigger issue, structural inequality. Companies benefit from branding and profit, while workers often take on the risks and remain invisible. So, overall, there's a gap between what we think we are buying and what's actually happening in the food system.
Good evening. As part of today's continuing investigation into the tomato supply chain, we're taking you now to the fields, where the story behind your grocery store tomatoes looks very different from the images you see on the label of your pasta sauce. Despite the billions of dollars generated by the tomato industry every year, the workers responsible for planting, harvesting, and sorting tomatoes remains some of the most underpaid and unprotected laborers in the agriculture industry. Many are migrant or seasonal workers facing long hours, extreme heat, pesticide exposure, and little to no job security. Their limited immigration status or lack of bargaining power makes them especially vulnerable, allowing major corporations to benefit from low labor costs while workers only receive a fraction of the industry's profits. A key driver behind these conditions is something sociologists call productivism. It's an industry-wide push to maximize output and efficiency at the lowest possible cost. Under this system, farmers and corporations are pressured to keep producing more tomatoes for less money. And because labor is one of the only flexible expenses, workers become the first place the system squeezes. This means more work, fewer protections, and the constant fear of being replaced, especially for migrant workers who rely on these jobs for survival. In short, the cheap tomato consumers enjoy often comes at the expense of the people who harvest them. We've already talked about how packaging can create an idealized picture of tomato production, but the disconnect goes way beyond what's on the label. In reality, tomatoes can often travel thousands of kilometers to global supply chains before they land in Canadian grocery stores. They might be grown in one country, processed in another, and packed or distributed somewhere else entirely. Because of this, consumers end up mentally distanced from the actual conditions behind their food. It becomes harder to trace where tomatoes come from, and the labor involved in producing them fades into the background. When a tomato crosses several borders, moves through multiple corporations, and gets processed far from the farm it was grown on, it's nearly impossible for the average person to see the difficult conditions workers may have faced during harvest. That distance makes it much easier for labor exploitation to continue unnoticed and, unfortunately, largely unchallenged.
As the Tomato Times concludes, this story reveals that tomatoes carry more than environmental costs. While technology improves efficiency, it also concentrates power and widens inequality. Labor conditions, pricing, and marketing shape who benefits, while cultural origin are often overlooked. Ultimately, sustainability must go beyond efficiency to include fairness, access, and accountability across the entire food system, because the true cost of a tomato is both environmental and social. Reporting from the field, this is the Tomato Times.